When someone dies, what happens? Forget religions. Forget theories of life after death. Think of death as it really is. A physical chemical process. Biological. The heart for the blood cools. The brain dissolves into oxygen. No music plays. No voice whispers goodbye. The universe registers nothing. There is no answer. There is no recognition. The greatest human fear is not death itself, but the idea that death is an absolutely insignificant event for the cosmos. You can mourn the loss of someone. Write a book about it. Create monuments in memory. But off Earth, where none of that matters, the universe will continue to expand indifferent, without ever noticing your pain. Eugene Thacker calls this cosmic pessimism. It's not just a common nihilism. Cosmic pessimism doesn't just say that life has no meaning. He says that the universe itself is hostile to sense. This is worse than believing that life is absurd. An absurd universe. At least he plays with the idea of meaning. A universe hostile to meaning doesn't even give room for illusion. It's like we're trying build sandcastles on a sandy beach. You can struggle, create stories, seek answers, but not in the end. There is only nothing. This is the real horror. Not one monster you can fight. Not one death you can prevent. Plus one absolute mirror that will never be broken. And in this silence you never realize. There was a promise that life would make sense. There has never been a signed contract between you and the universe ensuring a purpose. There was only one biological accident, one random chemical instant that, for statistical reasons, brought us here. But if all this is true, because we continue to live, because we stick to fragile meanings, which prevents us from accepting the poison and simply disappear. This is the central point of cosmic pessimism. And to understand it, we need to go deeper. Let's start from the beginning. Humanity never knew how to deal with the universe. Since the early days, when we were just a bunch of primates, frightened by the dark, we create voices to fill the void. God's myths, spirits, couldn't just be a purposeless noise. He needed to be the fury of a god. Death couldn't just be the end. Had to be a ticket. But what if none of this is true? Eugene Thacker describes cosmic horror as the perception that the world is us, radically indifferent. It's not just the fear of dying. It's no common psychological terror. It's the shock of realizing that there's nothing waiting on the other side. No God, no sense, no answer. It's a kind of horror that doesn't need monsters. There are no eyes in the dark because there is no one looking. There are no whispers in the night because there is nothing to say. But ironically, this is the deepest fear of human beings. Because deep down, we have always been waiting for something, some revelation, some hidden truth, a secret logic to it all. An answer that finally makes life more than a biological accident. Only that answer never came. Literature has always tried to shape horror. Classic fear has a concrete enemy. To death, a monster, an assassin. Something you can face, escape or destroy. But Lovecraft did something different. He wrote about entities so vast and indifferent, who didn't even notice our existence. Creatures like Cthulhu are not bad, because evil demands intention. The true terror, it's not a being that wants to destroy you. The true terror, it is a universe where its destruction is so insignificant, as an ant trodden underfoot by a distracted walker. And this is exactly where Thacker's philosophy comes in. It describes three layers of world. The world to us, the human world, where we make sense of things. The world itself, the physical world, independent of our illusions. the world without us, the world that existed before us, and that will continue to exist after. Cosmic horror is born when we realize we've always been trying to transform the third world. In the first, we try to fit sense into something who never needed us to exist. And we failed. Thacker doesn't see cosmic pessimism like just a sad thought. He sees it as an inevitable truth. He writes, "What is the world beyond human experience? What it would be like to think of a world without us?" Horror arises when we try to imagine these questions, and we find that we are. What does he mean by that? That humanity is a species who fails every time he tries to understand the cosmos. We create religions, philosophies, sciences, but all these attempts fail on a fundamental level. None of them give us a definitive answer about why we're here. And maybe it's because that answer doesn't exist. Perhaps the question why we exist be as absurd as asking, because appearances exist. Maybe consciousness is just one unfortunate byproduct of evolution, a biological error that made us think we should make sense where there is nothing. If that's it, so everything we do, all our stories, our civilizations, our philosophies, are just screams in the void, echoes who will never be heard by anyone but ourselves. And that is the basis of cosmic pessimism. The acceptance that the universe doesn't care. He never cared. He will never answer. But I know nothing matters what we have left, if this is all true. Because not just scream. If there is no meaning, because it continues to exist. That is the question that's the pessimists. And that's exactly why we need to go deeper. Most of the time, we live within a comfortable illusion that we are part of something bigger. We build narratives, mythologies, and even science as a way to connect to a purpose. We tell ourselves that existence has an order, that the universe follows rules that one day we may understand. But what if that's just another illusion? Eugene Thacker argues that true terror does not come from the unknown, but the recognition of the unknowable. There are things that cannot be understood, not because they are complex, but because they are beyond their own ability, human, to understand. And the greatest of them is the universe itself. Since the early days of astronomy, we look up to the sky hoping to find something. God's spirits, civilizations, aliens, anything to tell us that we are not alone, that life is not just a lost accident in the infinite space. And yet, what we found: nothing. No voice, no message, no sign that there is anything but us. Fermi's paradox exposes this frustration. In scientific terms, if the universe is so vast, where are all? The answers to this paradox are many, and none of them are comforting. Maybe life is incredibly rare. Maybe all civilizations destroy themselves before they succeed, communicate, or perhaps the most terrifying answer of all, be the correct. Maybe there is no one to answer. And that takes us to an even deeper concept. Thacker writes about 3 ways of thinking the world. But what really scares us is the last of them. The world without us. It is a world that exists before humanity and will continue to exist after her. An indifferent world. Our presence. Already stop to think about it. No matter what we do, the universe will not change. No effort human can change the fate of stars, the expansion of space, or the inevitable entropy. When the last human being disappears, the universe will continue as if nothing has happened. Imagine a distant future billions of years ahead. The Earth consumed by the sun in its final expansion. No civilization to remember that a day we were here, no trace of which we ever existed. Time goes unforgiving, erasing our every trace, like waves breaking footprints in the sand. This is the most brutal truth of cosmic pessimism. Not only do we die, but our existence as a species is insignificant. Whether philosophy can argue that life has no meaning, science confirms that, even from a physical point of view, human existence is a statistical error. Carl Sagan once said that, "We are just one pale blue dot, lost in the immensity of space." But Thacker goes beyond. We are not just small, we are irrelevant. The anthropic principle, one of the most provocative ideas in cosmology, suggests that we look like specials only because we are here to observe the universe. But what if we're just cheating? If life is not a cosmic necessity, but a biological error, we know the universe works without us. All we are, thoughts, memories, culture, it's a chemistry coincidence. And if the universe doesn't need meaning, because we would need. And it is here that Thacker's philosophy finds its apex. He writes, "Cosmic horror is not the fear of death, is the fear of that life itself was never needed." This is worse than nihilism. Nihilism says life is meaningless. Cosmic pessimism says life is a mistake, an irrelevant occurrence within a universe. I never wanted us to be here. And if this is true, what we have left as we continue. Death is not an event. Events have witnesses, has a beginning and an end. To death, on the contrary, is the root of all that could witness there. There is no experience of death, because in order to experience it would be necessary to be alive. This is the problem that plagued philosophy. For centuries, Epicurus said, "When we exist, death is not present. When death is present, we no longer exist." This phrase should comfort us, but does not comfort, because the fear of death is not just the fear of the end, is the fear of what the end means. Eugene Thacker takes this question to a deeper level. He argues that death is not just the interruption of life. Death is the only real thing. Life is the cloud. Death is what defines life. Not the other way around, but what does it mean? When someone dies, on the ground keep turning, traffic follows, the birds sing, the world doesn't stop that. It seems obvious, but it is a cruel truth. We want to believe that our death matters, that it generates some kind of rupture. But deep down, we know that death, it's just a mechanical failure of an organism, an inevitable biological error. The universe does not perceive death, because the universe never realized life. It means that, to the cosmos, the only difference between being alive and being dead, it's no difference. This shouldn't be surprising, but it's unbearable. Death terrifies us because we were programmed to fear it. Biology gave us this illusion because, if we didn't have it, the species would destroy itself. If we fully accepted the insignificance of life, we would stop reproducing, to fight for food, to build civilizations. More, what if we could look to death without that illusion? If we see death as what it really is, the dissolution of an organism, space inside a universe, who never asked him to exist. This is the difference between cosmic pessimism and the common nihilism. Unilism says, death makes life meaningless. Or cosmic pessimism responds, life never made sense to start. This brings us to an even darker question. If death is not just inevitable, more indifferent, then what is the real difference between being alive and being dead? Philosophy has always tried to categorize death in two ways. For some, death is the absolute end, a void of no return. For others, it's a transition, a ticket to something different. But cosmic pessimism offers a third option. Death is not an event, It's a constant truth. Thacker suggests that we are always dying since the moment we were born. Time is not a straight line, but a continuous collapse towards oblivion. If the universe is indifferent, so death is not liberation. No punishment. It's just the natural state of things. Life is just an interlude, brief within what has always been. But if death is inevitable and meaningless, so why do we keep living? Why don't we just hug the train now? Life shouldn't exist. This is not just a philosophical provocation. It is a statistical fact. The universe operates under cold, impersonal laws, a mechanical dance of gravitational forces, cosmic radiation and entropy. Everything tends to thermal balance, to the final collapse of energy. Life, on the other hand, is a violation of that order. Living organisms are highly organized systems that resist the natural tendency of matter to intensively. We are a mistake, a mathematical improbability, a momentary noise in the cosmic glow. And Eugene Thacker explores this idea with brutality. Life is not a miracle, but an incident, a statistical deviation that shouldn't be here. But if life is a mistake, because we continue to live, our most primitive instinct is not to think, create, or love, is to survive. We struggle to prolong life, even without knowing why. We cling to each other every second, as if there was a secret purpose driving us. But what happens when we realize that there is no purpose? Norwegian philosopher Peter Wessel Zapf argued that human consciousness is an evolutionary error, different from other animals. Not only do we exist, we are aware that we exist. And it condemns us. Other living beings just live. Do not question. Do not despair. A lion hunts without wondering if his life makes sense. A tree grows without needing to justify its existence. Only humans suffer with the anguish of knowing that one day we'll no longer be here. And what was our solution to this suffering? Create illusions. Zap describes 4 mechanisms we use to escape the terror of existence. Isolation. We avoid thinking about the truth. We create entertainments. Daily tasks to not face emptiness. Anchorage. We cling to something bigger than ourselves. Religions, nations' ideologies. Distracao. We fill our lives with noise, of work, of concerns. Sublimation. We turn despair into art. Philosophy. Music. We create beauty to mask the horror. But it's all just escape. And Thacker argues that cosmic pessimism is born exactly when we realize that none of these leaks are enough. If death is the rule and life is the belief, so being alive is not a blessing, it's a torment. Thomas Liggott, philosophical horror writer. Go beyond. Life can be considered a cognitive process in which consciousness arose by accident, just to realize that it should never have arisen. And this idea leads to the most extreme thinking of all, or antinatalism. If life is meaningless suffering, so bringing new lives into the world is not an act of love, but of cruelty. Schopenhauer suggested this centuries ago. He saw existence as a losing battle, where every pleasure is just a temporary absence of pain, and every mutual desire only creates new desires. The only logical way would be to interrupt this cycle. Stop being born. This idea of creation error has been explored in literature for centuries. In Frankenstein, by Mary Shelley, the scientist Victor Frankenstein, of life, unless it never should have existed. But when seeing your creation, he despairs. He realizes he didn't create something beautiful, but a monster condemned to rejection and suffering. The creature did not ask to be born. She didn't want to exist. but was brought into the world without a choice, just like all of us. Cosmic pessimism sees the humanity as Frankenstein's creature. We were born without asking. We are launched into a meaningless world. And we spend our lives trying to find a purpose. That does not exist, so if life is a mistake, how should we deal with it? Imagine that suddenly, all illusions disappear. There are no more promises of redemption, of meaning, of continuity. There's no longer a God watching. There is no purpose hidden in the details of the universe. There's only what you always hear, the absolute silence of the cosmos. What remains? This is the endpoint of cosmic pessimism. There's no salvation, but there is also no need for a. Eugene Thacker describes this revelation as a moment of collapse and lucidity. Cosmic horror offers us no hope, no despair, just an uncomfortable truth. There is that existence does not need justification. It means there is nothing to be done, that we should simply surrender to emptiness. Not necessarily. If there is no intrinsic meaning in life, then there are also no cosmic rules telling us how to live. The absence of purpose can be paralyzing, but it can also be liberating. Night was that of great health. When we realize there is no sense, we have two choices: fall into despair or embrace this radical freedom. Camus wrote this moment as the confrontation with the absurd. He wrote that in the face of the indifference of the universe, we can simply accept and instead of surrendering, move on anyway. Not because there is a reward, not because there is a sense waiting to be discovered, but simply because we can. Cosmic pessimism may seem a philosophy of defeat. Morte suggests that the real mistake is not the lack of meaning, is to believe that we need a. The greatest fear of human beings is not death. The biggest fear is living without needing any sense. Pessimism forces us to look at the universe as he is a faceless space. No narrative, aimless. But this doesn't mean we can't create our own narratives, even knowing they are illusions. Knight would call this the one act of pure creation. Camus would call it a riot. What matters is not what the universe says, because he doesn't say nothing. What matters is what we do, even knowing that in the end, everything will be forgotten. Camus explored this idea in his book The Stranger. The protagonist deserved, is condemned to death, and in the end, realizes your life has never made sense. But instead of getting desperate, he accepts the absurd with peace of mind. He realizes the universe never promised anything, that existence never had an explanation, and this acceptance gives you unshakable peace. He faces death without fear, because you no longer expect anything from the world, and maybe this is the only possible answer to cosmic pessimism. The most brutal truth is that the universe never needed our existence. But that means we should live in terror. Or we can, even knowing this, choose to live our own way. Cosmic pessimism does not offer us a happy ending. But it doesn't require a sad ending either. It just shows us the reality and lets us decide what to do with it. Death will come. Awaits us. But until then, what will we do with this interval called life? Maybe that's the only question that really matters. If this video made you question about the universe, about the lack of meaning of existence, and on the weight of cosmic pessimism, so he already fulfilled his role. Here we do not promise comforting answers, because the universe itself never promised anything. But if these ideas interest you, if you want to continue exploring the abysses of philosophy, of literature, and cosmic horror, consider becoming a member of the channel. Your support helps us to continue producing deep content. provocative and unusual. If you want to contribute even more, super tanks are there for that. But above all, just the fact that you watch, thinking and sharing is already something huge. In the end, even in the face of emptiness, what we have left is this. Continue. See you in the next video.